guys, and welcome back to another episode of the ADHDads. I'm your host, CJ.
I'm JJ.
And today we got another special guest with us in the Dad Den. We're welcoming Andrew Kirkaldy. How you doing, buddy?
It's good to see you, gentlemen. Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you too, brother. Why don't you tell a little bit about yourself to our listeners, who you are, and what does family look like, and what do you do for work?
Yeah, name's Andrew. I'm 39 years old, originally from Red Deer, Alberta, Canada. Came out this way back in 2006. 2010, I met my then wife. We had three beautiful children together. We have since started our journey of divorcing each other, pretty recent. And my job is, I'm pretty lucky to say this, I actually am a lacrosse coach at a boarding school here in New York. So I'm I get to live a passion every day, which is wonderful, which is really good. So,
That's
and
awesome.
I have three boys. I don't know if I said that, but they are, my oldest is 9 and my twins are 7. So it's a busy house.
How does one get into coaching lacrosse? Were you a big lacrosse player when you were in school, or what?
I was. In Canada, we have town leagues. Like, you don't really play through your high school or anything like that. So we just play through the town, and our town was just, we had coaches. My coach for the longest time was my next door neighbor, and I knew him, and I would watch him, and I just was always fascinated by coach. I knew I wasn't always the best. I mean, I did play at a pretty high level at one point in my career, but I just knew that and I was decent, but I just knew that I wasn't going to have pretty lengthy career. And I got into coaching really at a young age. And at first, it's so funny how we progress as a coach. It's kind of like how we parent. Like, I would first coach, like, it was all about yelling and screaming and sprinting if kids didn't pay attention to me. That was like me when I was 14 years old. And so I started coaching when I was 14. And then I got asked to do it at one point, 2 years at a college. And got asked to work full time for a company here in the tri-state area, and just kind of dove into it. It was just something that it kept me around the game. It kept me around the game, and it was all about kind of giving back. And I love teams. I love being a part of a team. I love the locker room atmosphere. I just love being around the boys, and it was a way for me to kind of stay in the game. And I just had to you're always growing with coaching, whether it's on the field, off the field, leadership, finances, you name it. You're always growing. It's such a wonderful job in that aspect.
So, who or what inspirations did you have along the way? How did that shape you?
I heard this line, you always take a piece of someone who coached you. You always take something good and you always take something bad from every coach that you had. My next door neighbor, loved him. I mean, he probably couldn't tell you the first thing X's and O's wise about the game, but man, would we run through a wall for him. Like, we would run through a wall for him. So he was just a really good culture driver. And then my junior A coach, he now coaches out in Florida. He was a pretty big inspiration to me. He, we still keep in touch, but he taught me how to be tough. He taught me how to be really tough physically, mentally. He really challenged our team to push our bodies and our minds beyond the limits than we thought we could do in a really healthy way. And so he was another one. And then my college coach, I had 2 college coaches. They were both okay, but I learned kind of what not to do to win over a team. So I've had inspiration all over, and then just working in the club world and just being exposed to so many coaches at the college level and in the club world. You just look and you watch them. You watch how they handle kids. You watch how they handle parents. You watch how they handle each other, how professional they are. Like, you never know where you're going to find some. But I would say that, Brad and Harold are my 2 big ones growing up, for sure.
And I guess I have a follow-up to that. You said, challenging you in a healthy way. I mean, this is a dad show, and that sounds like that translates well over to fatherhood. So do you have some examples? What does that look like?
So junior A, our practice, we would drive from Red Deer to Calgary, which is an hour and a half, and we would get to Is leave from school, boom, right there. And then before practice, we were running a mile, and our coach would say, "Yeah, you need to run a mile in 6 minutes, or you're going to be a healthy scratch. You're not going to play." And you're like, "Okay, I think I can do that." And you're running a 6 minute mile, and you're like, wow. And I never made a 6 minute mile, and he never scratched us if we didn't make 6 minutes, right? But it was like a nice, healthy threat to kind of like, he knew what we wanted, and he pushed us to do it. And when we would cross at like 6:15, 6:04, 6:07, it wasn't like anger or disappointment. It was kind of like just this smile and this eye contact saying like, see, you could do it if you wanted to. You just needed a little inspiration. It was like he would never yell at us for being like, 6:15. Oh, you're cut. You're not going to play. It was like just a smile. You'd make that eye contact. You're like, all right, I see what you're doing here. And then we'd go have a crazy 2 hour practice right after, filled with just physical sprints, toughness, fights and practice. It was just those are kind of just some things. And I think the cool thing about that though is that it was just doing what we needed to do to be successful at the game, right? If you wanted to be good, this is what you did. And you didn't have any resentments against anybody. You didn't argue with anybody. This is just what that high level did. This is how we needed to play.
That's awesome. I kind of have a um, negative response to the coaches that were in my life. I think, and granted, see, my nickname when I played football was "Can't make a good play until you piss me off, Kowalski." So that was the kind of coaching that I got. Like the coaches saw, like I didn't care. I wasn't passionate enough about it until you pissed me off, and then anger was a great motivator for me. But looking back, that just didn't like resonate with me. Like it's I just have all this negative like triggers of like piss Colton off to get him to play good, so which that works, I guess, to some degree. But my football experience and wrestling experience was just a lot of like barking in my ear and yelling at me, to get me motivated. So I can appreciate like a good coach that can motivate and find ways to inspire, that doesn't come necessarily with a shame aspect to it, so but
And it's fun.
and I grew up in Arizona, so I don't think that anybody in my town even knew what lacrosse was, let alone played it. So
And it's funny talking to Brad now, he would look back and say he wasn't happy with how we did certain things. That kind of makes me, bring me to a thought that I had, is just like how we go through life and our life experiences, like that shapes us as coaches too, in such a huge way, more profound way, than I've seen ever before. Like I've gone through some things these last, you know, last 2 years has been challenging at times, and then before that is my journey with sobriety, and so like sobriety and then going through a divorce, like those were two things that like really shaped me differently from how I coached, how I parent, how I kind of just viewed a lot. I was really like Colton. I was loud. I was loud and very wasn't too empathetic as a coach early, and then I was awarded some grace, some huge grace, in my life, and I was kind of like, well, that person showed me a ton of empathy. Maybe I should start doing the same a little bit. Mistakes can happen. That's okay. Um, so it's funny how those moments definitely help change our coaching philosophy. I would say for the better.
do you notice a difference from like maybe the mentality of coaches when you were playing versus to now when you're coaching?
Yeah. Yeah. I think when I was playing, how you were coached was common. That was
Yeah, I
very,
mean
very
it worked.
common.
We were state champs, I mean we had a very high performing varsity football team.
I want to hear the names of the other guys now.
But like it worked, right? But we've changed. Like the kids now, like they're not us anymore. They're
Yeah.
not us anymore. They don't have. We didn't have. I had a flip phone. You know, when I committed to where I went to school, it was on a piece of paper and through a
Yeah.
phone call. And then the only way I could tell anybody else was if I went and physically told them. Nowadays, these kids, I mean, it's different. It's very different. And now what I see, and I like it a lot better. We really know our kids now. Like we really know
Yeah.
them. We try to get to know them from a personal level. That's really, really important now with coaching.
So is that one of your like top recommendations for what makes a good mentor?
Just get to know them. I think it's relationships first and foremost, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so too, because I think that every kid has really wonderful potential inside of them if we can figure out a way to exploit that individually, right? Like, and not like one kind of method necessarily. You know, in some cases it does, you know, work across the board for the whole team. But I think like a good coach like really knows how to like pull greatness out of each individual on his team, you know.
It's funny. I went down a list of my roster and just it being in the DEA for 2 years and just learning certain things about kind of what I've done with my children and how I've like learned what their love languages are, right? I went down my list of my kids on my roster and I tried to understand what each one of their love languages was. Right. And you could tell quality time, right? Words of affirmation. Usually that's the big one. But then there's some guys that, you know, they really want that arm around when you're talking to them, right? They really want that pat on the head. And I don't think my coach back in the day was, you know, trying to see maybe what my love language was. Maybe he was, maybe he knew. I don't know. But that's something that I would say. I think the education too, though, that's the big part too, is that I think we are exposed to way more than what coaches had back then.
Yeah.
Psychology, everything.
You mentioned sobriety too, and I'm curious which came first, the divorce or the sobriety?
Sobriety came first.
Yeah,
Sobriety came first.
that was the same in my experience too. You know, I had a couple years of sobriety under my belt before we got divorced, and you know, gosh, I hate to say it, when I first started going through sobriety, I thought that this was gonna, you know, unleash all of the dirt and we were going to operate on honesty, and it was going to be like this, wow, everything is so great now, you know. Thank you for being honest with me. Wow, I don't even care about all of the stuff that you're opening up and have been lying about for the last 9 years. I'm just so grateful we're just starting over and being honest, you know. And that was not my experience. You know, the more that I opened up about like, hey, remember that one time when I told you I was doing this? Well, I was actually doing this, and you know, and the more that those stories came out, the more I kind of drove a wedge between my wife and I. She wasn't as forgiving as I had thought that she was going to be as I was coming to the forefront with all of this nefarious behavior. In fact, it kind of did the opposite and made us go in different directions. And through my sobriety was like this kind of huge wake up of all of these things that I had been masking all of these years or ignoring or not paying attention to. And now that I didn't have this drug to distract me from it, I was thinking about it a lot, and all of this clarity started coming in through the floodgates. And it was a very humbling, eye-opening, and hurtful experience for both
Mm-hmm.
parties. As much as it kind of led for the better in growth, it was also very painful to walk through that at the time. And I don't know. I don't know why I bring this up. Maybe to ask you if you had to experience something similar during your sobriety journey, or if that maybe that process maybe led to some realizations in the last stint of your marriage there?
You bring up that pink cloud kind of thought, right? Like, oh, okay, I'm sober now. Everything should be great. We're gonna ride off into the sunset and be that happy family that we're supposed to be, right? But wow, have we forgot our wake and the wreckage that's in our wake that that the horrible disease of addiction causes, right? That's why they call it that family disease. And I think I was probably just so excited. It just like, look at me, I'm getting sober. Because anyone who has battled with addiction to get sober, like it is not. And this is not me tooting my own horn or anything like that. It's just it's hard. It's hard to stay sober day in and day out. It is a constant thing that we have to do to make sure that we stay away from our drink or drug of choice. And I think you know, I was excited, and then I remember at one point looking at my kid's mother and kind of just saying, like, I don't know who I am right now. I have no idea who I am. I have no idea. And at that point, I think, I think, and this is where like one of the battles for me is, right? Like it's just this toxic shame that I have in my house or in my head, excuse me, that like, I had to, my wife at the time had to go raise 3 kids by herself because I was not mentally there, right? And by the time I had decided to get sober, um, at that point, my my wife at the time had checked out emotionally. There wasn't anything there, and she worked incredibly hard. So I think she had that realization, and then when we separated, that's when I kind of had to, because I was spending so much time trying to make just living amends, and within those living amends, I had lost myself. I was just trying to be like, we talk about being a nice guy all the time. Like I had lost myself about who I was, right? Um, and so this time apart, Colton, has been that for me. That has been the real, like, wow, I'm feeling a lot of what's going on right now. I'm seeing a lot of pain that I had potentially caused or had caused, not potentially did cause. Um, but at the same time, too, I'm starting to see I'm responsible for my actions and that's it. And that's what I can own. I'm not responsible for anybody else's. I have to control what I can do. Um, and that's what I can focus on. And so diving into core values has been huge, right? Discovering what those are and what they mean to me and not drifting from them. And that's hard. That produces that a lot of pain. We always say in sobriety, right? There's wonderful thing about sobriety is you get your feelings back. Horrible thing about sobriety is you get your feelings back. And so you feel everything to your point. So when you say real painful, yeah, it is. It can be. But I always go back to like the fact that if we can stay sober, there's a lot that we can do. There's a lot that we can go through too. There's not nothing that we can really do.
Yeah, they say to not date anybody or go through any major life changes for the first year that you're in the program. Because your head's probably all going a million different directions. You're on this end of the spectrum one day and then this end, 5 minutes later. So it's kind of like hard to like keep clarity, as you're like leveling out, rebalancing chemical hormones in your brain and all of this stuff. And, but I mean, I think that like that kind of behavior goes outside of like physical drug addiction and dependency, substance dependency, into like behavioral and emotional dependency. I think that like even if we don't have a drug or a substance in our body and we try to redirect our behaviors, change our ways of living, thinking, operating, and feeling, there's this detox period, right? Emotional and behavioral detox, where it's kind of the same process. You want to become better, you want to be good, you want to stop doing your bad habits, whether it's, working out too much or having porn addictions or, substance addictions, whatever it is. People want to change, but they often go back after 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, or make a whole bunch of different decisions, and in an attempt to like hone in on this new rhythm of operating. And then it becomes overwhelming and we give everything up and we go back to the way that we were, right? Like, what sort of processes help keep you focused?
My kids. I love my kids. I love my boys. Right? Like I really do. Um, I think one of the most terrifying things is that like just being in recovery, like one of the things you can't help but think about every now and then is like, okay, what happens to my boys right now? And it's no secret, right? I mean, the Super Bowl had fentanyl commercials, for crying out loud, right? Like it's scary right now. Even as a coach, right? And like I'm open with my sobriety as my coach, right? But just staying sober, and it was like kind of before it was like, okay, this is for them. This is to make them a better life. And the thought that comes in my head, like I can't stop that from happening, but by God, I'll at least show them where they can go to get help if they need it, because that's my job to stay sober, right? And then eventually it became into me. I like who I am when I'm sober. I like who I am. I like and I'm a better father, right? I'm definitely way more in touch. I can, like, I mean, gosh, I could apologize to my kids. Like, I have no problems making an amends to my children, saying like, "Daddy lost his temper. Daddy shouldn't have yelled," or having a full blown, like argument with my kids, like, and at times going like, "Ah, was I an asshole?" Maybe, but at some point, like, I'm here to be his father, not to be his friend, right? And so you kind of give yourself a little bit of grace. But like sobriety has taught me to just be open-minded and listen to what my children have to say and learn from them. And they've been kind of like me, my kids, my job in coaching has been like, that's kind of been my focus. Like it really has been. And that's been really, at the very beginning it was like, say, my marriage, right? Well, that didn't happen, right? It didn't work. But that, just looking at your kids, like we always talk about like spiritual awakenings, and like I remember wanting to put my kids to bed and like being like, "Oh, hurry up, go to bed, go to bed. I want to go downstairs. I want to hammer this glass of scotch and like just do what I need to do," right? To the first time where you're sitting in your kid's room and you're lying in their bed and they're asking you like really cool questions or important questions and you're present for that conversation. Man, that's powerful. And I was like, I want to keep doing that. I want to keep doing that. And so addiction and drinking takes away those moments. And those moments are powerful.
I mean, and holy shit, you're right, brother. I mean, when we were kids, it was pot and alcohol. I mean, when I was in high school, it was before the Oxycontin wave, so thank God I wasn't dealing with that in high school. I mean, God, the drugs are 100 times more addictive and 100 times more deadly nowadays. Like what kind of conversations are we having with our kids about that stuff? Because it's like, it's a real threat. It can be really, really dangerous. Yeah, I'm not there yet, but maybe it is something I need to start thinking about, you know, um, what those conversations look like. Have you had those conversations with your boys at all? Or had any conversations around your addictions and what sobriety journey has looked like for you?
Not like questions like that. They're 7 and 9, so it's like, but like here's what I am like I will be in an AA meeting around them, like, and it'll be on in the background, or I will have it and they'll hear me when I share. They will hear I'm Andrew, I'm an alcoholic, right? And what they equate that to is that daddy's allergic to alcohol and he can't drink alcohol. They're gonna understand what that means as they get older. Um, and how cool is it that I get to kind of break the stigma that everyone thinks that, well, that's what an alcoholic looks like. No, that's what an
Yeah.
alcoholic in active addiction looks like. This is what an alcoholic looks like in recovery. It's completely
Yeah.
different. It's completely different, right? And one day at a time. Eventually, when I have to have that conversation, Colton, about, like, hey, I hear you're going to a party tonight. We need to sit down and have a real conversation. Well, this is what daddy is. And they do believe that this is potentially genetic. So I can't tell you not to do something, but I need to make you conscious of what I suffer from, you know. And with my players, I talk, I players, it's my lacrosse players, it's kind of been like, this helps them more with the mental aspect, like identifying with maybe some emotions that they're going through. But I've definitely been very open about, like, you need to be making good decisions. You need to be thinking.
Yeah, and it starts, I mean, it doesn't even have to be about addictions. It can just be about how you show up in relationship to others, so you don't cause harm to yourself and them as well. I mean, our best example is to our kids in terms of how we show up for our co-parent, or what that looked like, um, to end up in divorce. And my son will come to that conversation with me and ask questions every now and again, and he will be curious about why we can't figure this out, like why we can't you know live together still, or go to events together. He's asked us, can you both be present at this event? And then that usually means, okay, we have an opportunity to have a conversation here. What are we going to go into? I don't like the idea of a parent choosing to shield their children from the realities of the world. Now, granted, we never have to go into the granularities, but when we're able to be honest about our vulnerabilities and where we have made mistakes, that sets them up for a greater character going forward. And I think a lot of parents have the other thought on that, like, well, if they know about it, they're going to then do the same thing. And that typically doesn't hold true.
It's almost like they're trying to protect them, right? But then their own curiosity is what's going to drive them to want to find out more. Whereas you're curious, let's have a conversation. But I'll tell you exactly everything you need to know, right? Obviously censored at some point, but it's good. Yeah, I think I'm excited to have that conversation with them when they ask, when they're older and they start to get to their, just a matter of time where they start to explore, right? I mean, I'm excited for that conversation. I don't
So
know
I
what
guess I guess my
it's going to
question to
be.
you guys might be is, what do we shield? How do we have a good understanding of ourselves in that, so we make sure that we are sharing what should be shared, and then leaving certain things out of it?
For me, I've always been in the mindset of like upfront and 100% transparency and honesty. And even if those conversations maybe seem a little tough or mature, I'm still willing to have those conversations, um, and be honest and truthful about it. Like, I
So
understand certain mentality of like wait until a kid's old enough, but
Mhm.
I think that can also be a slippery slope too, of like waiting until that time has passed, not knowing when the right time is, or that becomes a behavioral trait or pattern. And I don't know, I think maybe just because kids are maybe young and don't fully grasp 100% of the concept, I think that it's still good to like have the idea out there to be able to circle back around to it, ask questions about it as they pick up other perspectives, viewpoints, or opinions throughout their circles. So I try to really like not withhold if I'm asked about it. Do I go and just freely offer all the vulnerable information? No. But if I'm ever asked about it, I will try to like be as detailed and upfront as I can about it.
I think we got to. This is my thought. I think we have to do our job to not blame or present blame to the other person maybe involved in the situation. I think it's a real opportunity there to accept responsibility for our own actions and to own our part in something, and then to and I'm speaking strictly from a co-parenting standpoint here, like, um, to then, challenge our kids to maybe go ask their mother why. But, give the mother a heads up as to, hey, like, why, like, this happens. And I think, you know, I don't think it has to be, and I think Colton would, you probably agree with this. Like, I'm not going to sit there and dive in like, hey, daddy, like, pounded booze and like was just an absolute mess, right? I'm not going to say that. Daddy was allergic, and daddy caused some emotional harm to um, your mother, and she didn't want to put up with that anymore, and that she had every right to do that. And then you can go ask her why, as to, so like, I think we just have to make sure that we shield. We can't direct blame. I think that's what we have to do. I think we have to protect them from just like the blame game. And I think I really want my kids to own responsibility. Like, I really want them to own behavior. And I think it's not so like they can, it's just so more so that they can like go fix it, that they can correct it within themselves more than anything, that they can spot habits early, they can spot behavior patterns early. And hopefully that will give them success down the road. I don't know.
I think it sounds like an opportunity for them to really dive into understanding what they value, and when they hear the lessons learned and the ownership taken over things that their parents made mistakes over, they can further develop themselves by that model. So instead of looking at, oh, these are the bad choices, now I need to go find some of my own bad choices, they're looking at the opportunity of really fine tuning what it is that makes their values in life hold their character up high.
When I asked my parents about why they got divorced as a kid, the answer that I got continuously was it just didn't work out. Which I can understand the mindset, of a parent that says that, not wanting to place blame, divulge too much. It's a way of protecting our kids. But for me, it was confusing. Like what Andrew's saying, there was no opportunity for me to like see accountability role modeled to me. There was no opportunity for a conversation to go, for my parents to go, well, I did this, this, and this is something that I'm working on or have worked on or tried to change, or the things that I have learned since then, which I feel would have really set me up for a place to be like, oh, maybe there's some of that in me too, and that's something that I should watch out for. Whether it be genetic or behavioral or environmental, maybe those choices are something that I could have benefited from understanding the lesson learned and the accountability aspect and, the follow through after the fact. And I just never had that. It was just left ambiguously as it just didn't work out, and I don't want to make that mistake with my kids. When they do come to ask about that, I want to be able to accept the responsibility and share the lessons that I've learned through the mistakes, rather than just saying like it just didn't work out. It was just set of circumstances, couldn't be helped.
Yeah, I mean, like, take insurance for example. If at the scene of an accident, they don't typically want to hear the answer like, "Well, there was a crash," and that's that. And if we don't have the whole understanding of the entire vantage point, we give our vantage point. We share with them, this is as far as I see it, and this was my participation in that, and this is what I'm taking ownership over. So you're not claiming the entire wreck, but you are claiming your part in it.
And the emotion that comes along with it too, right? Like, now you're coming on a whole different level, where now you get to start to identify with, maybe down the road when they go through something similar, um, the feelings associated with it. We've talked about pain, the pain behind it, right? And how we can overcome self-blame, really, right? And a lot of like toxic shame that happens, that comes our way.
And yeah, and you're right. The further down the road, working toward repair, my kiddo had an incident yesterday at school where he made a decision that was unsafe toward a friend because that friend stole the ball on the playground, and so we had a call with the principal, and I asked some questions, came to some understanding of the situation, and then I simply offered up the idea that. Unsafe choices look like this typically when you think about it from your friends receiving those choices that you make. And then sometimes the most powerful thing to do is to talk about it after you've made an unsafe choice. What does it look like to talk about it? Or if you're upset and you're thinking about making an unsafe choice, go back. There's that script that essentially goes: is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it kind? All those questions, if we can ask ourselves those questions, can lead toward repair rather than further destruction. And man, I mean, I'm telling you, if we just go back to what we're taught in grade school and even earlier, we adults can end up with a lot less damage.
Yeah, like figuring it out yourself and then teaching our kids it is a whole different ball game. Finding the words. But no, Naomi came into my room the other night and had this kind of existential moment of, I always feel I'm in trouble. Kind of, we've talked about this before, JJ, that neurodivergent shame spiral, and dang it, I hate to admit it here, especially on air, but it's because of me that she's feeling that. It's nobody else's friggin' fault, It's that same generational crap that keeps rearing its head up in my unconscious behavior sometimes, God, we were just talking with Dan last episode, and I was talking about, the more that I am not aware of it, or the more that I think I'm okay, the more that I start backsliding, and the more that I make those mistakes. And that was very apparent in this conversation with our oldest, and the way that she felt. And it was just very humbling moment of, man, you're speaking my language, kid. When I was your age, coming into my parents' room, I was saying the same shit that you're saying to me. And I swore when I walked out of their room at your age that I would never do this to my child. And here I am doing it to you, unknowingly at times. But that conversation led to some really clarity for both of us, that I needed her to bring that up to me in that moment where I wasn't self-defensive, on guard. And because of the relationship that we have and the work that we do here, not always, but every once in a while, I'm able to hear her, and really pause and reevaluate. And it's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction, I feel.
Well, I was just gonna say that, like, you say, doing the same thing, and then you proceeded to talk about the differences that came after. What does that say?
Yeah, well, I guess, circling back to what we're talking about here with how much do you divulge, and how much accountability are we willing to take? I would like to think all of it, but again, the wherewithal and the awareness isn't always there too. But in the moments that I can, I really try to be present and double down and give her the power and the space to see that I'm really trying to practice empathy.
Yeah, I mean, I just think about the like going broadly speaking here. When we're losing our cool in the moment, we're basically yelling out, "I don't understand you right now." And then later is the follow up, like, "Dang, you know what? I really realized that I wasn't understanding you in the situation, and now I want to understand you better." I think
And if
that's
we
the
know
best
not
way.
something, if we know one thing, right, it's never too late to make that attempt to repair that either, right? Like that is like such a valuable lesson that I learned in parenting, I would say, I mean, that book that you recommended, JJ, that we've been reading, a lot of the guys, right? Good Inside. I mean, that book has got so many amazing gems. And like, again, I just think that's why it's so important to be able to say sorry to your kids, so that like, if they're gonna fuck up, right? Piss somebody off, and Lord willing, they're when they're kids someday, they're gonna piss off their own kid. They might remember, oh, hey, dad said sorry to me, so maybe it's okay to say sorry to my kid too, right? Um, and that's just another piece of being vulnerable and being open and showing that empathy, not only towards them, but towards yourself too, which is a huge piece, right? And something that popped in my head when you're talking about like the work, you might not hit every moment, but because you are always practicing and continuing to show up, you're going to hit a really big moment, and that's going to be huge, right? You're going to know like, oh, this is a big moment. I really need to pay attention here. And that's what I've started to see with the work, is that I used to miss a lot of them, and I was in my own personal pain. But then as I started to heal, I started seeing moments more and more, and that was huge.
Some curiosity for you guys. I wonder, you being in your relationships when you had kids before you went into a separation direction. Where I got divorced from a previous marriage, went into a marriage that had kids, and that experience for me was eye-opening in the respect of like how I communicated with my peers and other adults, because when it was like communicating with these kids, I was imploring a lot more patience and understanding, right? A lot more forgiveness for these kids because they don't understand. They haven't learned the things yet. So when they say something offensive or rude or whatever, we give them grace, right? But when it's with our spouses or our coworkers or our friends, you're like, what the hell? You're a grown adult. You should know this stuff, you idiot, you know? And I'm wondering if maybe you noticed some of those relationship dynamics in your marriage, the way that you extended grace to your wife versus to your kids. Because coming into this marriage and this relationship, I noticed that I had that different dynamic with these little kids versus like with my coworkers and friends and spouse. And it was like this moment of like, oh shit, maybe I should just talk to everybody like they're a kid. Like, because we're all just like fucking idiot adults, right? Like, we're all just like adolescent imbeciles that don't know everything. But we think because we're an adult and we have a driver's license and the right to vote and we got jobs that like we should know everything, right? And you should have your shit together. But I think that we're all just kids at different parts of the learning process. And I think that like once I kind of like was able to realize that, like I was a lot more friendlier. I had a lot more patience and forgiveness in conversation for other people. And I don't know. I'm just wondering if you've maybe noticed the distinction between those relationships in your own life, and maybe some realization as to maybe how that could have affected, changed, helped, or hurt your relationships with your wives. If you had noticed that, seen that, or been aware of that sooner.
How much time do we have left on this recording?
Yeah, it's a good question. Good question. I will say this, well, the first thing that came to my head is that when I was in my relationship, right, because I was, my wife at the time had to do everything. She had to do everything, right? She had to look after the twins. She was looking after the other one, and like she just had to. 'Cause she went into fight or flight. She chose to fight. Thank God, right? Awesome. Praise her a ton for that. That's huge. That's that maternal instinct. That is just amazing. Um, and then when I got sober, it's like, okay, how can I take some off her plate? What do I got to do? I got to be the dad. Okay, so I went to how I was raised, right? Dad, big, burly, the disciplinarian, right? Like, hey, come with me. And then, sometime later, now we're this way. We're gone. We're not together anymore. Well, I can't always continue to be that guy. I got to develop something. I got to develop a different dynamic with me too. I could still have some parts of that, but shit, I'm here by myself. I can't just yell and scream and expect everything to be under control. I need to, I need to shift. I need to be empathetic. I need to listen. I need to speak softly. I need to hear them. I need to cuddle. I need to give hugs. I need to give kisses. I need to, randomly pick them up and give them what they need. I can't just be this one singular role anymore. I need to be 20. And that's I want to say one of the blessings that has come out of being separated is that I've learned how to do that. I hope that I'll be able to continue and take that with me wherever I go. If I ever, it's just a matter of time, definitely not now, but whenever I decide to enter the relationship world again, I want to make sure that I take that with me. And then I want to do that with a teammate. I want to be a teammate with that person, because then I think that opens up way more dialect and really getting to the root of issues versus surface level.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And my answer's not far away from that either. So, bear with me. But just the first thoughts that come to my mind with something like that is that I can tell you I carried a lot of trauma and insecurity into my relationships. And that is a long, long story that I will try to, make succinct. But essentially, the idea is I became a people pleaser because I had a constant message in my head that I need to live up to everybody else's expectations of me. I need to please them. I need to show them that I'm worthy of their love. And that started with childhood. That started with my parents. And there's a great example that I still think of when I landed a job, like almost doubled my salary, and my parents, they asked me a question in response, like, is that like is that an industry that's actually going to be successful? And I just wanted to say, well, me, I thought they were going to be happy. I'm doubling my salary. I'm making something happen here. And that was the question and response. And so I realized I was chasing after their approval, and that was getting me nowhere for myself. And I did that with my wife. And then at the same time, I also resented her if she did not constantly, give me praise or, give me the validation that I was hoping for. So it was that covert contract essentially. I was doing this and I needed her to validate that. And that was unfortunate because that tells me that I wasn't prepared for that relationship, because I didn't pursue myself first and really find confidence in the person that I am. And it never means, like, when I state this, which I've stated it before, it never means that you are completely unwavering in every single aspect of your life. There's, adjustments, there's compromise with the person that you're in relationship with. Like, Andrew, you just mentioned teammate. That's the thing. You want somebody who compliments you in many of the ways that you hold yourself, high, where you're very proud of yourself, but you don't want that person to become, somebody who's your adversary in that. If they disagree with you, you want to be curious. You want to find out what it is that makes them so confident and, valuing and proud of themselves. Because if they come with some sort of, other angle, like in the Good Inside book, two things can be true at the same time. You might see it differently, but they might both have their merit. So with my tendency to people please, but also sabotage that, I wasn't able to go through the idea of these two things are true and be curious about my partner. So when it came to the point where I realized, oh man, I got to raise this kiddo, and half of the time it's completely on me to be the model. Well, I better start being curious about him, and I better start being curious about his mom, because if I'm going to continue down this path of destruction and whatnot in the process, I'm going to end up failing everybody, especially myself, and that's not going to help. So showing up for yourself, pursuing yourself first, and understanding your values, and then bringing them in a productive and curious way to the person that you are seeking out post you, or, in addition to you, I think that's what created the success in myself. Now, granted, I'm dating right now, so I haven't found my permanent teammate, but I do think I'm set up for the right opportunity to come my way now.
Yeah, those were awesome answers, guys. Definitely relate to that a lot. I think I definitely operated in that quid pro quo mentality. I operated a lot of, well, I'm doing all of these great things, and now I'm going to resent you because you're not doing them for me. When we haven't even really talked about it. And I think a lot of men and couples do. But thank you, gentlemen. Wonderful talk today. Definitely got my wheels a spinning about some stuff. So I appreciate your vulnerability. Appreciate your time. I know our listeners do too. So thank you guys for coming on. Thank you guys for listening. Don't worry. I'll put that Good Inside book in the show notes. So you don't have to go searching through this episode to find it. It'll be there for you. So thanks for listening, guys. Drop us a review on our little podcast platform. Best way to support us. I'm your host, CJ.
I'm JJ.
And this has been another episode of ADHDads.
Nailed it! Finally.
And that's Andrew Kirkaldy.
And that's Andrew Kirkaldy. All right, thanks, guys. Till next time.